Alrighty, well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrew Dauphiny and I'm the Instruction and Outreach Librarian at the New Jersey State Library. And it is my pleasure to present our speaker for today, Dr. Arvind Bhasker. Dr. Bhasker is a board certified psychiatrist practicing in Bordentown, New Jersey at Capitol Health. He has been practicing for 8 years and enjoys working with patients in an outpatient community setting. Dr. Bhasker also has extensive experience with TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation, a FDA-approved non-medicine alternative to treat severe depression. He also lives with his wife in Mount Laurel. So welcome, Dr. Bhasker. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us today about how we can keep our New Year's resolutions, which we so often tend to give up too easily, it seems. Before we jump into the presentation, I just have a few housekeeping items to go over. First and foremost, we will be taking your questions at the end of Dr. Bhasker's presentation. But if you have any questions, please submit them at any time using the Q&A or the chat feature in the Zoom dashboard. Dr. Bhasker has invited your participation today. So if you do have any New Year's resolutions or strategies that you've used in the past, please feel free to share them in the chat. Or if you think of anything as things go along, again, please feel free to share them. He'd like to kind of get your input and kind of see maybe where your interests lie. There will be a survey available after the webinar. So if you have time, we ask that you could please complete the survey. We always love hearing your feedback. This program is being recorded, so a link to the recording as well as a copy of the slide deck will be emailed to everybody once the recording is up on our YouTube channel. One last thing before we go into the presentation, I just want to go over a brief tutorial of the Zoom dashboard for those of you who might not be familiar. This is what your dashboard should look like if you're using a PC or a Mac. If you're using a mobile device, your dashboard may look a little bit different, but all of the features will still be there. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can see your audio settings. So if you're having any audio issues, you can check here to make sure that if you're using an external listening device like earbuds or a headset, that it's connected properly. At any point during the presentation, if you have a problem, there's a raise hand button in the middle. If you click on that button, that'll alert me and I'll send you a message in Zoom and hopefully be able to resolve the issue you are having. And as I mentioned previously, if you have any questions or if you want to contribute some ideas of some New Year's resolutions or strategies that you find helpful, please use them and submit them using the Q&A or the chat buttons down below. All right, well, that is everything that I have for you. So it is my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Bhasker.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So let me see if I can share the screen here. Okay, how's that working? Can you see that?
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. Well, hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Like I said, my name is Dr. Arvind Bhasker. I'm an outpatient psychiatrist here at Capitol Health. And I'm excited to talk to you all about how to keep your New Year's resolutions. I will say it's a little more difficult when I can't see anyone's faces, so I'm staring at myself the entire time. So if you see me looking around the screen, it's just me trying to keep eye contact off myself. At first I thought this was going to be maybe a difficult time to do it. We're already 3 or 4 weeks into the new year, and but when I was thinking about it, I think this actually works out, right? Because hopefully for those of you that have set your resolutions, we can see how well they've been going, and if you can make any modifications. So hopefully this talk helps you out. And if you haven't made a resolution, maybe this talk will give you some incentive on how to make an effective one for yourself. Okay, so let's get going here. So this is what we'll talk about for today. The first thing I'd like to talk about is your goals. I'd like to hear from you guys. For those of you that have set resolutions, I want to hear about that. I know we have the chat box, so I'm going to take a look at that here. If you feel free to share. I want to review what 2022 was like for Americans. And we can kind of compare ourselves to how the rest of America is doing. I'm going to talk about the 2 most important characteristics for achieving your resolutions. And then I'm going to talk about how you can actually create those effective goals that you can keep and maintain over time. And then to wrap it up, we're going to rethink our resolutions, right? From what we've learned, are there ways that we can tweak our current resolutions, or how do we make new resolutions to help us out? And depending on how we're doing for time, we'll try to get some audience participation there too. If we can get a volunteer, we can talk about maybe we can go through an example and see how that goes. Okay. So I want to hear from you first. I'd like to hear from you guys. If you don't have a resolution, if you could tell me why, which is fair. And if you do have resolutions, if you feel okay to share, tell me what your resolutions were and how are they working out for you? How many resolutions do you have? So I'd like to give just a few minutes here. And if I don't hear from anyone, I'm going to give you my own resolutions. Here we go. I can open up the chat. I decided New Year's resolutions were too stressful. Fair enough. 2022, not much better than 2021 due to the usual crazes going on in the world. It's understandable. Yeah. Trying to live a healthier lifestyle. Good. How's that going for you? Okay, sure. Well, hey, candy once in a while is not a bad thing, right? But as long as it's part of the plan. Yeah, and hopefully we can, I'm not seeing the names here, but maybe the first person that responded, maybe we can help you make a resolution here, or at least give you some tips on how to make one. Myself, I'm trying to eat more vegetables, and I'm not going to give too many more specifics because I'm going to give away some of the talk here, but that's my own goal. And so far it's been going okay. Anyone else? Yes, I can agree with that. Life in moderation. Yeah, I'm just trying to see here. I think there's a way I can see the panelists. Oh, we've got some new people in. So if for those of you that are new joining, welcome. I'm looking to see if anyone has their New Year's resolutions that they would like to share. You can tell me how they're going, how they're working for you. If they're not working, tell me what's not working. And if you don't have a resolution, that's also okay. Tell me why not. We'll give it a few minutes here. Okay, so I'll keep this open. I'll be on the lookout. Andrew, maybe if you can, ping me if people are putting in more. I'll look back once in a while. Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about are the statistics, right? And I think this is helpful just to get a sense of to see where other Americans are at, right? And maybe we can identify with some of these. And some of these statistics, we're actually going to talk about in the meat of the talk here. Okay, so I'm citing the Forbes Health Survey. This was a survey done in 2022. It just came out in 2023, and they looked at 1,000 US adults, which is certainly not representative of the 300 million of us, but it's not a small study either. So we got some good data from here. So one of the things that was interesting that I found, it said that 71% of people didn't feel pressure to make goals, but about a third of people did. And this is something very important that we'll talk about a little bit later. About 29% felt pressure to make New Year's resolutions. Gen Z, I don't know if we have any Gen Zers here, they felt the most pressure than any other generation. So just as a review, sometimes I forget all these generational gaps. Generation Z is, I think from something like the mid-90s, 95 to 2010. So what is that? That's right, our 28-year-olds, right, to our 13-year-olds. So our young adults here are feeling the most pressure for New Year's resolutions. Men felt a little more pressure than women to make goals. So what was important to people in 2022? So 20% said mental health is a top priority. Good for them. Good. 16% said physical health was a top priority. I think it was about 60-70% said that physical health and mental health were a top priority for them in 2022 as far as resolutions go. Interestingly, women said they were more likely to prioritize mental health, and men were more likely to prioritize physical health. Baby boomers, I don't know if I have any baby boomers here, they were more likely to have weight loss as one of their main goals. I think baby boomers, I think these are those who were born in the mid 40s to 60s. I don't know if I have any of those in the chat here today. About 75% or so felt like they could hold themselves accountable to the goal, which is higher than I thought, to be honest. And Gen Z, again, the younger generation, they felt the least accountable. They felt like they couldn't rely on themselves to uphold themselves to the resolutions. Interestingly, Americans seem to like their resolutions a little bit more than the rest of the world. They had some data showing that almost about 44% of Americans like to set resolutions, which again, I thought was interesting. They did something in Sweden where they looked at the resolutions as well, and they found that Swedes only like to keep, or only 12 to 14% of them keep resolutions. So Americans, we like setting our New Year's goals. Okay, so what are the most common New Year's resolutions that people put? And I know I talked about a few of these before. So improved mental health is by far number one, 45%, along with improved fitness, 39%, losing weight, 37%, improved diet, 33%, and improved finances, 30%. So maybe similar here. And like I said, these don't add up to 100 because a lot of these have overlap with one another, right? People that are, or people are making multiple resolutions. I've got some of these jokes here. I like these guys from, I think Glassbergen is the comic. So I claim no credit for any of these, but this guy is here telling his doctor, I don't need to live a long, healthy life. My retirement money runs out at age 67. So let's not be like this guy here. Okay, so this is an important piece of data, right? So in 2022, how long do these resolutions last? And again, I was actually pretty surprised, optimistically, right? So here, we've got 11% of resolutioners that last less than a month. So that means maybe 1 out of 10 of you right now, we've got 1 or 2 people in this room that have resolutions that haven't made it, which is okay. And that's why we're here talking about it. About 14% make it a month, about 20% 3 months, 11% 6 months, and 55% make it to a year. Now, it says less than a year because, I mean, this survey was done at the end of 2022, right? So we don't know how far, this 55% is making it into 2023. But I thought that was pretty good, 55%. On the flip side, we got to identify with the 45% of people. How come these resolutions are not lasting? How come we have people that are failing or not meeting their resolutions after a month or a few months? Okay, so let's get into the meat of the presentation, right? So what's the secret, right, to make and keep a New Year's resolution? And hopefully I can clarify some of these tips and tricks for you today. And this woman is telling, looks like her husband, my fitness watch counts my steps, calories, heartbeats, reps, and excuses. So again, I don't know if you have a watch like that, but don't be like this woman. Okay, and part of this, there is some psychology to this. We have to kind of approach the way that we think about things and the way we approach things. So again, it's not so much to have the motivation. Again, like I know I cited that statistic about Americans liking to make goals. Great that we have the motivation, but we have to have something else to carry it through. Okay, so let's first talk about why some goals fail, right? Why some goals are ineffective. And they've done a few studies showing that when you have multiple goals, that often leads to poor results. And often there's a poor structure to goals, right? The where, the what, the when, the how, that's not there behind the goals. The goals, they can be too ambiguous, they can be too difficult, they're set too far in the future. Sometimes they even conflict within themselves, right? You've got some, maybe financial goals and relationship goals and food goals, and sometimes they can butt heads with one another. Importantly, sometimes people don't know the why behind their goals, right? And it could be because of social pressure, expectations, your doctor's telling you to lose weight. I mean, it could be for a lot of things, right? Here's this guy's telling the doctor, I'd be a lot healthier if you'd stop finding things wrong with me, which of course is not the case, right? But and there's some other reasons too. And like I said, people don't develop action plans. It's kind of this vague, okay, I'll use myself as an example. I'm just gonna eat vegetables, right? Of course that's not, it's very, very vague. resolutioners are not specific on when they will start, right? And they don't make a plan on how they will make sure they keep on task with the presence of obstacles. If there's a box of donuts when I go home every day, I don't have a plan to avoid the donuts and eat the vegetables, it's probably going to fail. And here we have this woman telling her friend, if I gain 10 pounds, I'll have the incentive I need to stick to my diet. And there she is eating her cheeseburger and talking to her friend that's eating salad. Okay, so let's dig into things that will help you make your goals, right? And create your goals. And so I'm going to talk to you about two major things that will really, really help with this goal creation. So this word, okay, sounds a little advanced, but let's just break it down. It's pretty simple. Self-concordance. What is it and why is it so important? So what is this? It is the extent to which people pursue goals, their personal goals, with feelings of intrinsic interest. What does that mean? What does intrinsic mean? So if something has intrinsic value to you, it's important to you by its very nature, by its very character. It has value just by being, right? If I eat vegetables or if I do something for myself, that's for myself and not because of my wife, right? That's an extrinsic value, right? So intrinsic value means something that has character just on its own, right? And why is it important? Well, goals that are not self-endorsed, that don't have this self-concordance, that are not intrinsically made, are extremely high to create high interpersonal conflict. And again, I'm throwing my wife under the bus. I mean, she doesn't actually do this, but if she's yelling at me to eat my vegetables and I don't feel like eating my vegetables, but that's still my goal, there's going to be a lot of disconcordance within myself, right? Because that's not something that I intrinsically value. Oops, sorry, here we go. So I wanted to cite some studies here, some data, right? So these are not things that are just kind of made up. I mean, people have actually done some really good research onto this to see how this affects people and their resolutions and goals. So this study was done a while ago, 25 years ago, back in 1998. And they wanted to see how these 4 values affected goal setting for people. So what they did is they took a lot of these participants and they had them rank these 4 reasons for pursuing goals. And these are not all the reasons for pursuing goals, but these are 4 important ones, right? So let's go over these. These are important. So the first one is identified. So what's an example of identification? So I feel this is an important goal to have, right? Intrinsic, and that's what we talked about already, right? I feel that accomplishing this goal will be fun and create enjoyment for myself. Another reason for pursuing goals is introjected. I would feel ashamed if I don't. And external reasons. My doctor told me I needed to do it, right? And these are just examples. So these are not all good reasons, but these are still reasons nonetheless, right? And so what they did in the study is they had each person rank from 0 to 10, 0 to 9, 0 to 10, each of these reasons for their goals. And then and if you take a look at these 4 reasons, right? So the top 2 are defined self-concordance, right? Because these are intrinsically valued. These are good traits, right? We want to identify with our resolutions. We want them to have intrinsic value. And the last 2, right? The interjection and external, those are the negative things, right? I mean, these are still reasons that we can do it, but they're not the good reasons. So what the study did is they did some basic math, right? They added up the self-concordant goals, right? They identified an intrinsic. They added up the negative reasons, the interjected and external, and they subtracted the negative reasons from the positive reasons, right? To get a total score, right? They subtracted the bad from the good and got a total score. And what they found was, unsurprisingly, the people that were most successful in achieving goals had a significantly higher total score than those that were not successful, right? And that shows how important it is to identify with your goals and have them intrinsically, have some intrinsic value to them. So there can be a point of contention here, right? Because here in this example, I wrote that intrinsic means, I feel that accomplishing this goal will be fun and create enjoyment for myself. So does that mean that something that you value has to be fun and create enjoyment? Not necessarily. I mean, I hate eating vegetables. I mean, that is not fun and that does not create enjoyment for me, right? But what intrinsic means, it means having value, right? There's some purpose, there's a meaning, that there's that value behind it, right? So maybe a way I can reframe it is that if I eat vegetables, I'll lead a healthier life, right? That's less visits to the doctor. Maybe I can do more weight at the gym, right? And those things are important to me, right? So now the value isn't so much eating vegetables, it's maybe those other things, right? So there's still that intrinsic value there. Now, if I wanted to be more stubborn about it, right? If I said, well, I really don't want to lower my blood pressure. My doctor just told me I had to lower my blood pressure. I don't know why. Well, then there's a few things, right? So I think one thing then is education, right? In this particular example, maybe it's about talking to the doctor on why reducing your blood pressure is important. Right? So knowing why you're doing it, because that's so important, the why. And the other reason is maybe this person needs some more introspection, right? Just really sitting with ourselves and being like, okay, what is the reason I'm doing these things? Is there an external reason? Is it an internal reason? This is really important to me. Oh, and I will say that in the study, they found that people that were able to have this high self-concordance, this high identified and intrinsic value, their goals were they were maintained over time for a longer period of time as well, compared to the ones that had lower total scores. And I will say, this is something you can do even on your own. Now, you don't have to follow this formula per se, but if you even just put a number to the intrinsic value and put a number to the extrinsic value and see the differences, you can even rank your goals and see which ones have a higher score, right? And those are more likely to succeed over time. Okay. And I promise I won't go too much into all the studies, but this is the second most important point, right? So the first point was self-concordance, right? That's the why, right? So this study was done in 1997, and it studied the effects of an implementation intention. Again, this complicated sounding term, but what does that mean? So that's the where, when, and how of making a goal, right? So they studied both these things together, the where, when, how, what, right? And the self-concordance, the why. So why do we need to have a plan? I mean, I know everyone says, yeah, you have to have a plan, you have to have structure, but why do we do it in the first place? So what this does is it makes action, and again, I'll explain this. It makes action initiation quicker, even when under high cognitive load. So what does that even mean? So that means when you set a resolution and let's say I'm gonna use myself, I wanna eat some vegetables. Now I come home from work, let's say I'm tired, I'm stressed out, there's financial issues, my family's sick. There's a lot of stuff going in my brain. My brain is full, right? Your brain is full. There's no time to think about food in this situation, right? I may just say, I'm just gonna order takeout. You know what? I'm stressed out. That's what I'm gonna do. So obviously that's not good, right? But if we had a plan, let's say I meal prepped, right? Over the weekend, and I had 5 tasty vegetarian meals for me. Now it takes that load off my brain. No longer do I need to think about how am I going to get those vegetables into my diet. It's pre-planned. So it's putting that energy and work in the beginning, making this plan, forming the plan. And so when stress is high, there's a lower chance that you deviate from it, right? There's a higher chance I'm just going to go pull out that freshly made meal I made over the weekend, or the meal prep meal I made. And it decreases the number of interruptions to the plan. Another example they used in the paper is they talked about someone who wants to drink a lot more water. They want to drink 8 glasses of water. So how can you do that? So if you have a water bottle with you, it's not just drinking more water. You say, okay, I'm going to drink a glass of water, 8 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock, maybe after lunch. You're going to go to the bathroom. When you go to the bathroom, you're going to fill up your water bottle. You're going to get a glass of water before you leave for home, right? And so you plan it. So there is no question when you do it, it's going to happen, and it takes off your thinking. Right? The less you have to think about it, the better. And what the study found is that when you combine the two, this self-concordance and this implementation intention, that's what's best for maintaining resolutions in the study participants. Let me see if I can bring up the chat just to see if there's any other questions before I move on. Here, I'm reading some things here. Okay, someone's telling me they're a baby boomer. I think people confuse resolutions with sacrifices, which is true. Yeah. I'm sorry, give me a second. I'm just reading through everyone's responses here. Of course, some resolutions are difficult when the change you plan for deals with negative behaviors. Correct, yeah. Brain is full. This is so true. Yes, yes. So that's the importance of having this plan. Okay. All right, let me minimize the chat here. All right. Okay. A few more studies, and I'll stop talking about studies here. So another study found that, and this is pretty obvious, but I think it's well worth repeating. Effective goals for a better mood. So a study found that when people met their goals, they felt better. When people didn't meet their goals, they felt worse. On success, right, we feel competent, we feel satisfied, we feel determined. And we'll touch on this a little bit later, right? This is sometimes why we don't want to set goals too far ahead, right? We want to have good structure to our goals. And so, when we meet those goals, they make us feel better, like, hey, we can do this. And now it gives us even more motivation to go on to the next step, right? Next month, okay, how can I continue to meet it? And this guy's telling a psychiatrist, I think he's a psychiatrist, I'm ordering a transfusion, replace your B negative blood with B positive and see if that improves your mood. I wish it were that easy. All right, and very last study here. And so this was actually a recent study. I think it was done in 2020. And so they looked at approach-oriented versus avoidance-oriented. So for those people that had approach-oriented goals, they did a little bit better, 56 to 44% versus avoidance-oriented. And I think after what we had just talked about, hopefully this isn't too much of a surprise, right? Approach-oriented, there's more of an intrinsic value. There's more self-concordance with approach-oriented. I like eating meat, right? So if you tell me not to eat meat, that's not something I may look forward to, right? But if you tell me, or if I tell myself rather that, hey, I'm going to eat vegetables and I'm going to have these tasty dinners, right? Now that's something I'm working towards. That's approach oriented, and that's again, that's something that aligns with my values of living a healthy life, right? This lets me do other things that I want to do with my life, as opposed to just saying avoid something that I don't like doing. So again, not a huge difference, but something to consider when you're making resolutions, having something more approach oriented. You want to focus on what you can do for your life instead of what can you take away from your life, if that makes sense. Okay, so how do we integrate some of these things together, right? So I hope the takeaway from those few studies were the self-concordance, right? And the implementation intention. So how do we put these things together? And I'm sure many of you have already heard about this tool, but I like to review it just because it's so good. So it's called SMART goals. This acronym, it stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timed. This has been around for, I think, 20 or 30 years, and they use it everywhere. They use it in high-level, business meetings. They use it in education. They use it with teachers. They use it in psychotherapy. It's proven over the test of time. It works very, very well. So let's go over this a little more in depth. Let's see how we can use this to help make your goals. So let's break it down, right? So the first thing is specific, right? What will be achieved and what will you do to get this done, right? Seems pretty easy. So what's not specific is to say I'm going to eat more vegetables, right? I mean, that's as generic as you can get. But if I say my goal is to eat maybe, and I'm making this up, right? A cup of carrots or broccoli, right? Every day for the next month, and to incorporate it with my dinner. There, I've made my goal very specific, and that's something that's tangible, right? That's something I can plan. And again, this goes back to the implementation and intention I talked about before, right? This is what am I doing? Second is measurable. How will you account for your progress? This can be subjective or objective, right? I mean, certainly with things like with weight, right? You have your scale for that. I can measure my vegetables with a cup, right? I can keep a journal and track down, but it can also be subjective as well, right? I mean, you can, if you're tracking your mental health, you can keep a journal, right? Every day you track your mood, right? And over the month you can review, and they have, tracking scales for depression and anxiety and all these things. But you need to have some data, right? Because without data, then you're just kind of shooting in the dark. There's no way to keep yourself accountable. Okay, the next thing is achievable. Is it possible? Do you have the resources and the skills? If I want to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu in 2 weeks, that's not going to happen. I don't have the skills for that. So you want to make sure it's reasonable, right? Losing 10 pounds in 2 weeks, that's not achievable. Losing 10 pounds in a month also, it's certainly possible, but it may not be sustainable, right? So make sure it's achievable. Relevant. So this is a self-concordance part. Why is it important to you? And this is something that I think a lot of people miss. The why is so important. So relevance is extremely important here. And the last thing is time-bound. right? What is a time frame you're giving yourself, right? So it can't just be I want to eat more vegetables, right? But if I tell myself, by 1 month, I want to see if I can keep up the 1 cup a day for every day. Now I can take a look back and I can track that, right? And the time bound also is good because it lets us review, right? So certainly goals, it's okay if you fail, right? It's okay if you fail. I think Gordon O'Brien, he said something, right? Some at that point, he said something, it's okay to fail, but you should do everything you can to avoid it, right? So you set up goals for yourself. And if you fail, then you take a look back at what happened, right? Like what was the mistake here? Or what could you do better? What accounted for the difficulty? And then make changes to your goals to account for that. What would not work is to do the same thing over again and expect different results, right? That's what Einstein said, right? That's the definition of insanity. Just so you make changes after a month or so, after a few weeks, whatever you decide is important to you. So you want to make sure that it's time bound well. Okay. And so, that was the talk, right? So I hope that showed you some important skills. I wanted to go over some of the data from some of the surveys from before to show where Americans stood, right? And, most people are successful, 55%. We don't know how long it's going to last past that, but a lot of people were having difficulty. We identified two major characteristics of having effective goals, right? The why, and then the what, where, when, and how, right? And then we talked about how we can implement SMART goals to achieve our goals, right? So I wanted to hear from you guys. We want to be like this woman actually here, right? And this is the woman in the previous comic. She's sitting here with her bowl of lettuce or salad or whatever. And she said, I started working out and lost 6 inches from my waist, 4 inches from my hips, and added 3 inches to my smile. So let us all be this, right? Whether it's a month or 3 months or 6 months. So using some time here, I was wondering if I can get some audience participation, if we could have maybe a volunteer and maybe give a few minutes here, take 3, 4, and 5 minutes. And what if you can apply some of what we talked about to SMART goals? And you can even write it out, right? So the SMART, I'll bring it back up on the screen, and tell me how you can reframe your resolutions to fit this model. So it's 12:30. So why don't we give 3, 4 minutes? If you have a pen and paper, great. If you want to type it out, great. But let's reconvene then. And I'm excited to see what people have to say. And if I don't hear from anyone, I'll talk about myself, which I'm sure no one else wants to hear.
Dr. Bhasker, in the meantime, while people are doing this, do you have any strategies for using the SMART model if you're, somebody who's been very disorganized or kind of flying by the seat of your pants, and now it's like, okay, I want to start using this. How do you adjust your way of thinking to now maybe the SMART way?
Yeah, so you're asking if you have current resolutions, how do you adapt it to the SMART goals?
That, or if you're not very good at planning, so SMART, you have to put in the effort and kind of go through these steps. What if that's something you've never done before? How do you kind of retrain your brain to kind of then use this model?
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think if you've never done that before, yeah, if the planning is not your forte, I think starting small is good. So, when we talk about the time bound, right? I would recommend, keeping it for a few weeks, even a week if you need to, right, or a month. And this way, you work on the SMART goals, but you give yourself the feedback, right? Because again, this is something you want to measure on a daily basis, and the more feedback you can give yourself, the better, because now you can make adjustments to it. So I think that's the biggest thing. I think if you have someone else in your life to help you keep accountable, that's also a positive, if that's possible. So I would say those two things. And I would say go easy on yourself, right? I mean, the goal here is not to be successful with every single iteration of doing the SMART goal plan. The goal here is to have effective and maintainable resolutions for the rest of your life, right? There's nothing special about New Year's, right? That's just, we all feel like making resolutions, whether we make a resolution on January 23rd or whatever, November. Be easy on yourself, be kind to yourself. If things go wrong, that's okay. Taking a step back and identify what went wrong and then make changes. Reasonable changes. Yeah, I see someone that wrote something about a fitness device. Yeah, I know that was a joke with the fitness device. I think fitness devices, they can be hit or miss. Um, I think they're good on some level because I know the smartwatches or these things, I know they can sometimes motivate people to keep on top of their steps or their calories or their heartbeat. Um, so in that way, it gives you some data, right? Which is good. Um, but sometimes those things don't actually align with your goals, right? Because the steps, like if someone wants to lose weight, the steps may not be the most accurate way for you to measure your weight loss, right? Your weight loss, you want to be determined by what's on the scale. And so the steps may not be in line with that, right? And or sometimes people obsess over some things that don't really matter, like the heart rate, unless it's very high or very low. It's not meaningful data. But that's good to hear that you're doing the protein-based breakfast and you're 85% successful. When you say 85%, what does that mean? The 15% are those missed days, or the quality of the food is not on point? Okay, fair enough. Yes, that's a big thing. Yes, perfection is not the goal, right? Um, it's about having that resilience, that maintainability. And I think that's a good point, actually, right? So, when we're making these goals, right, this with the specific, right, and achievable, we want these to be reasonable things, right? I mean, we're not trying to, lose 5 pounds a week, right? These have to be very achievable and specific for us. And so, doing something like SMART goals, it does require more energy and time, right? But it requires that investment up front, right? The more planning we do up front can help us with the resolutions down the road. It helps us stay on track a lot better. That's great. Congratulations. That's huge. 15 pounds. I guess my next slide here is questions. So, I mean, if anyone has questions too, I'm happy to answer them as well. Don't be like this guy. I mean, certainly he gave up his red meat, but for lunch I had a bottle of root beer, a bag of potato chips, and 2 candy bars. So this is kind of in my example, right? So this is why it's not a good goal, or not always the best to have avoidance approach goals, right? Because if I just told myself I'm going to eat less meat, I might end up like this guy, right? So instead, we want to think of things overall that add to our life, things that we can do better, not subtracting from our life. Okay, anyone feel inclined to share? No pressure. If as long as, I mean, the most important thing is these things are for yourself, right? As long as you can, write it down and incorporate these strategies into your life, that's the most important thing here. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I was just asking if anyone had questions or wanted to share their own SMART goals. I want to give people a few minutes to think about their own goals and how to reframe it to fit this model. Okay, guys, well, I hope you found that helpful, right? So just to review, right, we talked about the intrinsic value, the 2 most important characteristics of setting up goals, right? That self-concordance. And I believe Andrew is gonna, forward you these slides so you can take a look at some of those research study slides. The most important things are the self-concordance, the implementation intention, and then using SMART goals and having that as a structure. Any tips on staying mindful of the goal? Yeah, great question. So I think it's different for everyone. For myself, I think it's probably the data, right? It's the measurements, right? So when you get that feedback on a daily basis, that helps you stay on top of it. Also, I will also just add on to that one quick thing is, having that plan, having that prep done beforehand, and it might sound like a little silly, but it helps you stay less mindful of it, right? Kind of that example when I said when stress is high, the chance that anyone kind of meets those goals is very, very low. So the more work you can do ahead of time to get yourself in the best position to not have to think of it, to not have to be that mindful of it in the moment, the better chances you'll have, right? Whether it's like a drinking water example, or the losing weight, or eating a healthier diet. If you have that, let's say like, you want to eat healthier and you have the fresh food or fresh fruit stored in the fridge, now you don't have to think about it. Now you just, when you're hungry, you just grab that food instead. Okay, everyone. It was nice to meet everyone. I hope you guys learned something, and best of luck with your New Year's resolutions.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhasker. It's been very insightful and very helpful. So thank you so much. Again, thank you all for attending. We look forward to seeing you at our future programs. And as I mentioned before, this program is being recorded, so be on the lookout for an email from me with a link to the recording as well as the slide deck. So I hope everybody has a great one last question. What is your advice on limiting your distractions?
Oof, that's a tough one. So I think not to repeat that what I said before, but I think honestly that's the best thing. The distractions is having a plan, right? Because when you're in the middle of a situation, again, I'm just going to use a random example of like if there's a donut sitting there on the table, and my goal involves not eating that donut, right? It's very, very tasty, and it can be easy to succumb to it, right? I mean, of course, yeah, there is some level of motivation and kind of willpower and kind of staying in the lane. But if you have a plan, right, on what to do, if you have a specific example, I'm more than happy to help you with that. But if there's a plan on avoiding that in the first place, that'll keep you away. So like, for example, it's not to have donuts in the house, right? Or to have other snacks around that you can enjoy that you're not going to feel guilty about eating, that are healthy snacks, right? And this way, when push comes to shove, when there's a lot of stuff going on in your life, and you have to make that decision, well, you've already taken that decision away from yourself, because now it's not something you have to do. You've already set yourself up to make the best choice possible, right? Because the donut's not even in the house, or you've got 10 other snacks ready for you that you can eat. And so that's what I find that can limit some of those distractions. So planning, that's extremely important. Yeah, of course. The other thing too, the small thing also is, the intrinsic value. In that study, I include the references in the slide if you want to ever go back and read it. But they also looked at how well people, were able to maintain their goals in the face of distractions, right? And the people that had high intrinsic values attached to their goals were able to maintain that course through distractions a lot better than people that did it because of societal pressures or family pressures or whatever other pressure, right? So there's a more of a drive to get through distractions when that goal is meaningful to you, right? As opposed to trying to please someone else. Good. Go somewhere fun.
All right. Again,
Okay.
thank you so much. And we'll see everybody later.